Hello. Hey, in this video, I'm going to talk about the gamma operator, and I mentioned it in previous videos that I'm going to be able to utilize it. I just had to figure out how to utilize it, and what I determined is I can use it as a way to do conversion or as a generator. And what I mean by that is you're converting a monode into a polynode. Or you could look at it as that you're generating a polynode using a monode. Uh, so I kind of have been using both terms. I haven't decided on which one works best for the to call it, to label it now. We'll just call it gamma. You kind of get the idea. Also, it follows the schema: alpha, beta, gamma. So third, letter, or the gamma with the G, so generate. So anyways, it was kind of that idea. I'm just like, I needed something to kind of some schema to kind of help me remember and keep track of things, and it helped a lot. So thinking of that way. So the idea behind the gamma operator is pretty simplistic. You're taking a monode and you're converting it into a polynode, which I've been using this. I mean, I literally could write mi 8 times. However, as that I showed you a previous convention when using strings, it was just so much easier to just say that there's this many of this. It was just easier that way. And then the only other conversion is in this case is you take in the polynode, and this has to have zero adicity here. For now, that could change. It just makes most sense in this context. And then it gives you the monode back, and that's your conversion. Obviously, I didn't touch a lot on this, but you can have a polynode with greater than zero adicity. However, the main idea is that the index is the same for each node inside the polynode. The way you generate a polynode is using the beta on a monode with zero adicity. That's why I've been using zero up here. But for this situation, this works best just to keep it simple with the zero adicity, how you would build a monode without adding anything to it. Because you can take discrete steps, like I showed in that one video that showed the phi with the T, sub T, and then the process into the resultant, which was the psi sub k, I think, showing that every resultant has a different, its own index. So every resultant could be different, possibly, and everything happened in a time step. So you could do a monode and then access it and do another operation that gave it a greater adicity. But as we speak, in a polynode, anything that happens to one node in the polynode, it happens to all of them. There might be a way in the future to like single it out, but I don't have a specification for the different copies inside the polynode on operating with them. I don't have anything like that right now. So that would be something that I could work on later. So this actually looks really interesting when you start looking at it in the graph. So I'm gonna write it out in a graph. But that's essentially the gamma op. So, and I'll just write the adicity out here. So the gamma operation on this results in nothing. So if what the conversion or the generator is doing is it's taking the adicity of the monode and turning it into a polynomial. Well, if there is no adicity, and there can't be a polynode because it's essentially, it looks like, if I showed you, if you remember when I showed you the strings, how we could represent a polynode, something like this, blah, 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 right? Well, and at the end, there's obviously that. Well, if there's 0 of them in there, then you basically have this, right? There's nothing in there. So that really doesn't mean nothing. You can write that or take it away, and it wouldn't really do anything. It wouldn't give anything or take away anything. It just means nothing. So basically it just means moo. Like it absorbs it back into the moo universe. It doesn't really do too much with that. So that was the whole idea. If there's a zerodicity, then it just goes back into the universe, the moo universe. And then if there is an arm, then we get a single noded polynode, right? You get the 1MI kind of thing. So you know there's just one there, right? Because one arm. So each arm gives you another polynode. So if you have A equals 2, let's see, let's draw that out real quick. Your gamma. Then you got 2 in the polynode. So that's the whole idea there. And then you can go all the way down to n, and then you can have n number of these copies inside the polynode based off of n number of arms that the monode has. And it's really interesting to see the conversion and how you can kind of go back and forth in that. Interesting enough, you could look at 0 MI with the 0 adicity as being the moo, based off that the gamma formula. It could actually literally just be your moo operator. And so with that kind of explains what I meant by the gamma operation and the conversion and the generator. In the future video, I'm going to talk more about the operators themselves and how you can kind of bunch them together to work on things. It becomes a little bit more complex. Instead of having to take individual steps, and I could just put it all in one thing and then have an order of operations specifically defined to work on the monodes or the neighborhoods. And as we do that, things can get a little bit more complex and a little bit more interesting. You can see a lot more diversity in using monodic theory. And then in future videos, I'll also explain more about neighborhoods and kind of where we can go with the idea of neighborhoods, and maybe even show them as they get more and more complex. That's a little bit later down the road. And really, that's it. I guess the only other thing is trying to understand what that mu symbol means when I talk about it being a universal, or not really a universal, but also not a null, but it kind of has a sense of both. If you haven't noticed, it has kind of that. It's just because. And I really, really like that idea of absorb. It just kind of takes and absorbs the activation of something back into the universe. And it doesn't really mean nothing anymore. I mean, you can always bring it. You can bring it back out, as I showed in other videos. Anything in the moo, you can have it reactivated, if you will. But I'm finding it interesting as I go along, and I'll keep adding more as I work this through. Ultimately, my goal is maybe by the end of summer, if I have a lot of it figured out, maybe I could start writing it down and making it more formal. I'll have to learn how to do that, but I imagine it'd be a very, very interesting journey to try to formalize it into a paper and get really good peer review and get a lot of people's opinions and knowledge and constructive criticism on how to proceed with what I'm doing, because I ain't gonna stop. I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm gonna keep doing the videos too, because I find this very therapeutic in a way. Um, it's kind of a way to enjoy things. So for me, I like academic things. I like intellectual things. I like thinking about thinking. I like modeling and creating, and that it's just kind of my vibe. Um, I like to, as I've told someone before, I like to paint in symbols. And I like to sculpt using math and logic and ideas and concepts. Uh, One of my inspirations as I learned more and more about what intelligence is and what thinking is and cognition, and that was definitely Douglas Hofstadter, huge inspiration of mine. I don't know him personally. This isn't like an endorsement of anything. I just he's a really good author. Had really good uh, insight into many different things when it came to cognition and cognitive science in general. And I think I mentioned him before in previous videos too. So um, definitely a huge inspiration uh, in me wanting to learn more, think more, and look outside the box, inside the box, around the box. Throw the box away. Just everything. But I will continue as long as I can, and I appreciate it if anyone watches. Thank you.